Good luck for the Oscars. You're playing a Bob Dylan who uncompromisingly chooses his individual art. Do you consider it is advisable to, like Dylan did, separate aesthetics and activism? And is that possible for artists that want to be responsible in these troubled times?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why it's so good to come to Europe, man, because the questions are so much better out here. So much better. I mean, look, he left behind a complicated legacy in that regard because I think he was sort of, this is nothing new to say that he sort of resented or was in tension with the fact that he was labeled a savior of his generation and he made music and art that was so thoughtful in the early 60s. But as the Woodstock generation came to fruition in the late 60s, he didn't go to Woodstock, and he was making Nashville Skyline and Blonde on Blonde in a period where Joan Baez and figures like that were going to protests and marches. So to answer your question directly, I think, how did you say it? You said to divorce aesthetics from the nature of your art, of activism. Yeah, if we're talking in the language of Bob Dylan, I think he definitely did. I mean, his music spoke for itself. My theory on it, my interpretation, and I can't speak for Bob because he's alive and well in Malibu, so he could tell you better than I could. My interpretation is that topical songwriting, political songwriting, was a texture for him to express himself through in the early 60s, mid 60s. In that rock and roll, bringing it all back home, Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Elvis Presley, those are the people he initially aspired to be. Once he was in a position where he could get a band, and once he was in a position where culturally the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks were taking over, I think in many ways it wasn't as complicated as political activism. I think it was just more fun to have a band and to play rock and roll. And if you look at all of Bob's legacy, I won't bore everyone with a history class, but he really went out of his way to not be pinned down as an activist, even though his music was really thoughtful. There was the famous Farm Aid concert that was inspired by what he said at Live Aid, if I'm not mistaken, something of that. I think it was the comments he made at Live Aid or a different benefit concert, comments about farmers in America that were considered controversial at the time that inspired Farm Aid, Willie Nelson's benefit concert to help struggling farmers in America at that time. So it wasn't like his work was strictly non-political the rest of his life, but a lot of it was,